Every time I complete a big workout, I make the same thing, a protein shake. This may not seem like a big deal, but it turns out this simple habit beats a choice that many athletes make, and quite frankly, one I made for years. Because the hour after you finish a hard effort is one of the most important windows for your biology as an aging athlete. Today we're going to talk about the engine behind everything. Not your heart, not your lungs, not your legs. We'll dig into our cells, the microscopic power systems responsible for all of your energy. I'm Patrick, and this is Pillar 4 of our Biological Reserve series, the Metabolic Reserve. Today's pillar is the one that makes all of the other three possible, because without clean, efficient energy production at the cellular level, every other biological system in your body runs short. Let's start with a word you've probably heard, mitochondria. In biology class, they introduced this as the powerhouse of the cell. And that's exactly right. Mitochondria are tiny structures inside almost every cell in your body. And their job is to take the food you eat and the oxygen you breathe and convert them to usable energy. That energy comes in the form of a molecule called ATP, adenosine triphosphate, the universal fuel of the human body. Your beating heart, your contracting muscles, your thinking brain, your tissues as they repair themselves, all of it runs on ATP. Now, mitochondria are one of those systems that naturally loses function as we age. But as you'll see in this video, we can dramatically affect the rate at which that happens. When we are young and well-trained, the mitochondria are dense and efficient. They produce a lot of clean, usable energy. But as we age, especially if we're not active, the number of mitochondria drops, and the ones that do remain start to wear down and become less effective. At that point, instead of converting fuel into clean energy, they start producing a form of cellular exhaust called free radicals that leaks back into the cell. And that exhaust does damage. Because free radicals don't stay contained, they spread and damage the parts of the muscle cell that respond to insulin. Think of insulin as a key and the receptor on the cell wall as the lock. When your cells are healthy, the key works. Insulin arrives, the door opens, and glucose flows in to power the cell. When those receptors are damaged by free radicals, the keys no longer fit. The door stays shut. Your cells can't absorb the glucose they need and rebuild and maintain themselves. Muscle protein synthesis slows. Breakdown accelerates. The slow, progressive loss of muscle mass we call sarcopenia begins, and it compounds over time. Researchers have a name for the broader inflammatory state this creates. They call it inflammaging, the slow, chronic, low-grade inflammation that accelerates the breakdown of virtually every other tissue in the body. So what we're really talking about here is this. Metabolic decline is not just a consequence of aging, it's a primary driver of aging, and that is something we have a lot of control over. Here's where the story changes and where it gets genuinely encouraging. Because while sedentary aging does create this decline, we can reverse it. We can actually build mitochondria. When you push hard in your workouts, when you're breathing hard, when you stress your body physically, and ask more of it than your body can comfortably give, your muscle cells experience a demand they can't fully meet. And that gap triggers a signal that tells the body, build more mitochondria. And the chain reaction that follows is exactly what we want. More mitochondria means more clean energy. More clean energy means less cellular exhaust. Less cellular exhaust means better insulin response, and better insulin response means lower inflammation. Then, lower inflammation means your brain, heart, your muscles all function better for longer. A few months ago, I published a video on the 5 worst foods for aging athletes. The response was extraordinary. But the comment section on one specific topic made me take a close look at myself. Hundreds of you wrote in to say that you had cut back on alcohol or stopped completely. I read every one of those comments. and they pushed me towards a decision I'd been avoiding. I was in the middle of a dry January at the time, so I extended it indefinitely. I've not had alcohol since, and I don't plan to go back. Now that I understand what alcohol is doing to my body, my mitochondria specifically, it's the easiest commitment I've ever kept. Studies have shown that even 2 or 3 drinks in the hours after hard exercise can reduce muscle protein synthesis by up to 37%. I decided I can't afford to lose any anti-aging advantage my body is giving me, so I stopped. This shake I mentioned, it's so much better than a post-ride beer. Once you understand what the post-workout window actually does, this swap is obvious. In the 60 to 90 minutes after a hard workout, your muscles are primed to receive and use protein. The cellular machine is active. The mitochondrial building signal is running. If you give your body quality protein in that window, you amplify everything your training just started. And something you should know as you age, you actually need more protein to trigger that same response. The sensitivity decreases, so the dose has to go up, which means the timing matters even more as you get older. Alcohol closes that window. Protein opens it wider. A quick note before we go deeper. The custom electrolyte formula I covered in the Superfoods video has been one of the most popular resources in the Road Less Traveled newsletter. There's a link up here and in the description. It's free. Sign up. You'll get the full recipe and immediate access to the newsletter. And you can mix this yourself for less than 10% of what it would cost you to pay for a pre-mixed powder. Now I want to share something I came across in my nutrition work that most people don't realize. And it's a bit surprising because it seems to contradict what many of us were told for years about fat. It's called the athlete's paradox. Here's the puzzle. One of the primary ways that sedentary aging causes insulin resistance, which many of us know as the precursor to type 2 diabetes, is through a buildup of toxic fat fragments inside the muscle cells. These fragments physically block the insulin signal pathway. They cause insulin resistance even in people who don't look overweight. Now, it turns out that highly trained endurance athletes also store elevated amounts of fat inside their muscle tissue, significantly elevated. So if high intramuscular fat causes insulin resistance, why are really active people and elite endurance athletes the most insulin-sensitive humans on the planet? That's the paradox. The answer is the mitochondria. In the sedentary body, fat enters the muscle cell and it sits there without enough mitochondrial capacity to burn it. It breaks down into those toxic fragments that block the insulin receptor. In the trained athlete, the mitochondrial network is dense, active, and constantly hungry for fuel. Fat enters the cell and gets used. That's what it was designed for, actually. Intramuscular fat is actually one of the primary fuel sources for endurance performance. It's stored close to the muscle fibers by design, so it can be mobilized quickly. In the trained or physical active person, it's stored as stable inert triglycerides and burned cleanly during the next effort. The only variable is whether you have the mitochondrial capacity to use it. Your muscle can be either a clean burning furnace or a toxic waste site. The amount and health of your mitochondria determine which one it is. In 2012, Scott Trape and colleagues at the Human Performance Laboratory at Ball State University studied skeletal muscle tissue from a group of endurance athletes that were lifelong, in their 80s. The lifelong athletes showed dramatically higher mitochondrial signaling than sedentary adults the same age. A separate study by Ian Lanza and colleagues at the Mayo Clinic in 2008 compared 3 groups: young sedentary adults, older sedentary adults, and older adults who had maintained regular endurance exercise throughout their lives. The older active athletes had mitochondrial function and insulin sensitivity that looked almost identical to the young adults. And Kevin Short and colleagues, also at the Mayo Clinic in 2005, measured mitochondrial DNA abundance and ATP production rate in adults from their late teens all the way through their late 80s. Decline was consistent, but it tracked with physical activity levels, not just with age. The loss of mitochondrial health that we so often assume is inevitable turns out to be driven largely by how much we move or stop moving. There's one more layer to this I want to address, and it's the layer I've been spending the most time on personally. Training drives mitochondrial health, but training without the right nutritional support can be counterproductive. All of these biological processes need the right fuel to work. The nutrition side of the metabolic health for aging athletes is far more nuanced than most of us are acting on. The dietary guidelines most of us grew up with were not designed for a 62-year-old who rides 300 miles a month and does 2 resistance sessions a week. They were designed for the median American adult who is sedentary. As confusing as it can be trying to reconcile published guidelines with independent research, it's even more complicated when you factor in the specific needs for older athletes. That confusion often benefits people who are selling us nutrition that really isn't working for us. I want to change that. I spent the last year working through the Stanford Nutrition Certification Program and cross-referencing what I've learned there against the most recent independent research and published guidelines. I want you to learn what I've learned without spending a year doing it. I'm creating a nutrition program designed specifically for all of us. It's not ready yet, but it's coming. If that's something you want early access to, subscribe to the newsletter. Put a link in the description and up here. That's where I'll announce it first. And let me know in the comments if this is something that interests you. Tell me what you want to know, or just type nutrition. The next video pulls all 4 pillars together, and I want to bring your thoughts and ideas into it. If you haven't subscribed, do that now. This is where we learn together how to build our health, enjoy our bikes and our active lives, and keep that going for many years to come. Trust the system, trust your body, engineer your health span. I'm Patrick, I'll see you out there.